So Collateral is a 2004 film directed by Michael Mann. It stars actors like Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, amongst others, right? There are a lot of great themes in this film, such as, the theme of morality, the theme of free will, the theme of, again, free will versus fate, and the theme of duality. But the one that I'm going to talk about in this particular video that really stood out for me, amongst the various other themes in the film, is the theme of courage, right? And how courage and letting go of fear and your excuses, right? The excuses that you may have for yourself can really change your life, right? And that's one of the main ingredients that you must have if you really want to get the ball rolling, in my opinion, right? How courage is the, central pillar in really making things happen, right? Just think about it. How many of your actions, your words, your thoughts are being filtered by fear in one level or another, right? So this is the theme that I'm going to be focusing on. So you have these two characters in the film, right? You have Max and you have Vincent. And again, there's a theme of duality, permeating the film all throughout. But you have Max, who is the, opposite of Vincent. You have Max, who is kind of this shy, timid, kind of, I guess for the lack of a better word, beta character, right? Who's kind of afraid of everything. He has multiple excuses. He lies to himself, right? You have all these interactions throughout the film, with different characters like Annie and Vincent. And you can just tell from the tone of voice that this guy has, that the way he talks about himself and he talks about his dreams, that he doesn't even believe what he's saying, right? For example, he talks to Annie about his dream of opening a limousine business and how he's been working at it and how he, just needs to save up a little bit of money to get the ball rolling, right? But again, you can just tell from the way he expresses himself and his tone of voice and the way he is just, expressing his dreams to Annie, that he doesn't even believe what he's saying, right? You have, at the end of the interaction, you can tell that Max likes Annie, the lawyer, but he's too afraid to ask her out, right? He's too afraid to ask for her contact information or to say to meet up again, right? It's actually Annie who comes back to the cab and ends up giving her information to Max, right? Kind of just cementing this very weak image of that Max has throughout the film, right? Just a very weak kind of passive person. And in the opposite side, you have Vincent, who, is this guy who's very well put together, right? He has a suit on. He's looking sharp. He's a smooth talker. He's confident and courageous. He doesn't take any BS from people, right? Circling back to Max, there's an example in the movie where his boss is kind of giving him BS, right? And he's too afraid to stand up for himself for whatever reason, right? For the fear of losing his job, for the fear of looking dumb, or whatever it may be, right? He's too afraid to stand up for himself. And you have Vincent, right, who's the complete opposite, right? The guy's a hustler. He's a total sociopath, don't get me wrong, but again, he has his stuff together, and he knows where he's going, right? You have, again, that specific example in the film where, Vincent and Max are talking to Max's boss, and you can just see the difference in how Max carries himself and how Vincent carries himself, right? So you have these two opposite sides of the coin. One is fearful, constantly fearful, right? Obviously, he's taken hostage, right? Max is taken hostage. But aside from that fear of losing his life, right, he has other fears instilled in him, right, that are just holding him back. And you have, again, on the opposite side of the spectrum, Vincent, who isn't really inhibited by anything or anyone, right? He's just going about his business, and he's not afraid to really be himself around others, right? And again, so the specific example that I want to use to really demonstrate, this theme of being courageous and letting go of fear and excuses, right? So before I get into it, just a little background for those who haven't seen the film, right? Again, you have Max, this cab driver, right? Kind of a very average, normal kind of dude, right? Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but you can clearly see that he has a lot of limiting beliefs, right? And again, just the way that he carries himself is not ideal, right? Not a very masculine figure, right? when you compare Vincent and Max together. He is lying about, he's lying to himself and he's lying to others about his dreams, right? How, you know, he can't get this limousine business started, and that he's one day gonna get this limousine business started, right? And again, you can instantly pick up that he's lying to himself, and that for whatever reason, right, he's being fearful and not taking action towards his dreams, right? He's kind of just settling for less, right? Being a taxi driver. Not to say that, being a taxi driver is anything bad, right? But, this guy obviously has bigger plans for himself. But again, he's just stuck in mediocrity, right? Stuck in complacency. And it's not until Vincent comes up to him, right, and kind of wakes him up, not in the best way, but he wakes him up from this derp state that he's in, right? So the specific example that I want to talk about is when Max is basically being called out on, right? Vincent is calling him out on his BS, right? He tells him that his dream is not even that difficult, right? That all he needed to do was put a simple down payment on a limousine. And, he tells him how he's full of it, right? Basically, I forget the exact dialogue between the two, but he's basically calling him out on his BS and his lies, right? And telling him that he's basically just being a coward, right? And that his dreams are actually within reach, but all he needs to do is actually take action and reach after them, right? And Max basically is silent after this interaction, right? He has nothing to say to him because he spoke the truth, right? He knows deep down that Vincent spoke the truth, right? And this is one of those wake up moments that I'm sure a lot of people have in life, right? That I'm sure you've probably experienced in life, right? Where somebody or something happens to you and you kind of wake up from, a derp state that you may be in, and you realize that things are a lot more clearer than what you thought they are, right? That behind all the excuses, behind all the fear, behind all the insecurity that you have, right, things are a lot more simple than what you make them out to be. So basically, Max has this wake-up call, right? He's being shaken away from the matrix, right, to, for the lack of a better word, right? And from this point on, he really starts to change for the better, right? I think his true personality starts to come through, right? The old Max, the Max that was not really him, right, kind of falls away, and the truest version of himself, the one that isn't inhibited by any sort of limiting beliefs or emotions, shows through, right? Partially because obviously he's in the life or death situation, but also because kind of Vincent, again, thanks to that little speech that he gave him, he kind of wakes him up, right? And the truth hurts, as they say, right? So obviously this is a movie, right? And I'm sure, stuff like that is not very common in real life, but the message remains, right? It's not until you let go of your excuses and you confront the truth, right? You stop being afraid and you actually take courage, or you actually have the courage to take action, is when your life starts to change. And from the movie's perspective, right, you can see this in Max's character, right? Everything starts going for him. And at the end of the film, right, the threat that was, behind him, the threat that was, so basically, right, at the end of the film, everything changes for Max, right? For one way or another. He ends up saving Annie at the end of the film, right? Vincent ends up passing away. So the threat is gone. He has Annie. He had the courage to go up and save her, right? So I'm sure things will change for Max from that point on, right? He realizes his mistakes. He realizes that he was the only person holding him back, right? And I'm sure, one can assume that he ends up, starting something with Annie and ends up starting his limousine business, right? So again, there are a lot of things in this world that are just trying to keep you in this kind of submissive, weak state, right? Kind of like how Max is at the beginning of the movie, right? Very passive, very conformist kind of way of living, right? That's trying to steer you away from achieving anything, right? And from achieving your dreams. And this is no conspiracy theory, right? Just take a look at any area of life, whether it be, the food that you know, is in the supermarkets, the television, and the movies that are becoming more and more common these days, that are just basically tools for propaganda, right? Making you think a certain way. Or, you know, just take a look at the education system that's present in most countries, right? It's not a very efficient or, you know, creative system. It's just meant to basically create obedient workers in most places, right? And I believe even the founder of most of the modern education system, right, even said so himself, that the goal of the education system, right, is not to create thinkers but to create workers, right? So there are so many areas of life that are just trying to get you into this kind of derp state, right? This submissive, weak state. So that pretty much is the one of the most important themes or the important messages of the film, right? At least to me, that you know, that interaction between Vincent and Max towards the end of the film, where Vincent finally just calls out Max on his BS and his lies, right? And from that point on, that really is the catalyst for Max to really change and to be who he really is, right? So how would you live your life if fear wasn't an issue, right? Would you settle for less? How would you act? How would you talk? Would you be a more courageous person? Would you actually go after your dreams and not settle for less, right? So just remember that life is short, and you shouldn't live life constantly thinking about this, right? But it's an important thing at least to consider from time to time, right? That our time here is limited, that we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So why wouldn't you go for your dreams, right? Why would you settle for less? Everything and anything is possible, right? Within reason, of course. So don't be afraid, and instead of being afraid, start being courageous, right? Start doing those things that you know you should be doing. There's this great quote that can be certainly applied to this film, right? We avoid risks in life to make it safely to death, right? So don't be one of those people. Don't be one of those people that at the end of their life, you know, regrets not taking more action, regrets not being more courageous, and regrets not really going for their dreams, right? So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching and for listening. I just wanted to share that particular example and theme from the movie Collateral, right? Let me know your thoughts. What do you think about the film, the characters, the themes? You know, what do you think about the messages in the film? And what do you think about the film in general? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. Thank you to all the subscribers and viewers of this channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.